Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Eleonora Salas, Director of Studies at ICANA Binational Center in Córdoba, Argentina. Thank you for joining us today. And welcome to the 13th webinar of Teaching Capacity Building 2022, a professional development program sponsored by the US Embassy that we started hosting in 2020 in response to the challenges we faced at the beginning of the pandemic. If you have attended the previous webinars, you already know that this program consists of 15 webinars presented by really hardworking Argentine English teachers that are all alumni of US-sponsored professional development exchange programs. They are sharing their experience and their best practices as educators and language teachers in their quest to create environments that support engagement for learning. We do believe that no matter where we are in our learning journeys as teachers, we can always learn something from the journey of others. So we sincerely hope that these presentations will inspire you to bring new perspectives into your current teaching practice, whether it is in person, online, or hybrid, and that they will help you create exciting learning experiences for your students. We are deeply grateful to the US Embassy, the Regional English Language Officer, all the alumni presenters, and the Argentine Network of Binational Centers for their support in the organization and delivery of this program. Our special thanks to Noris Sardak, who is joining us today from the Embassy, supporting us in this program. You are welcome to start telling us in the chat where you are from. I'm so grateful for all of you who have been attending most of the webinars that we started in May. During the presentation, you are welcome to type your questions and comments in the chat section, and the presenter will address them once she finishes her presentation. We will also post a link with a PDF of the presenter's slides, so you can relax and enjoy the presentation. You will have access to this link. You will also have access to a link to download your certificate of attendance. Now I would like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Laura Giacomini. Laura is a graduate teacher from Lenguas Vivas Juan Ramón Fernández. She was a graduate teaching assistant in Language 4 in the same school. She is a fellow, a Fulbright fellow of the Teaching Assistantship Scholarship. She has been teaching English since 2005 in a variety of contexts. She has experience in primary, secondary, tertiary levels. She's currently teaching English in primary schools and facilitating workshops for teachers in Argentina and in the US. She has been giving presentations since 2014 at local and international education conferences. She has had her work published by TESOL International, by TESOL Connections and English Teaching Forum. And she completed the best practices of online English language teaching certificate with TESOL International Association in 2020. In addition, in the fall program of 2020-2021, she participated in the certificate, in the TESOL certificate, developing an online teaching program, also sponsored by the US Embassy in Argentina. She is a frequent collaborator of the Alumni Network, and this year she has been selected again as a coordinator for the Tech Girls program in Argentina, and she will be an English tutor for the third year in the STEAM Week, Be Inspiring program, also sponsored by the US Embassy. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your experience and expertise today. She will be presenting making learning accessible for students with special needs. So we can't wait to hear from you and to get all your practical advice on creating the necessary conditions for students with special learning needs. So the floor is yours, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleonora, for such a wonderful presentation. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you to the U.S. Embassy for sponsoring this wonderful program, as well as the Regional English Language Office and the Binational Centers here in Argentina. They are all wonderful. They make these things happen, which is fantastic. And it's a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon sharing with my colleagues some of my experience, when it comes to working with special needs or children with special needs or students with special needs. So if that's okay with you, I'll start sharing my screen.
Yes, please.
And I was amazed to read about all the places the attendees are from. We have people from Argentina. We have someone from Ghana.
Yes.
So that was really amazing. So I'm glad to have you all here. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Without further ado, I'll get started. And whenever I start with my workshops or webinars, I like to present an agenda so that we have a sense of direction for today. First, I'm going to be dealing with material redesign and material design. And I say redesign, and it's between brackets because, as you very well know, there are lots of resources out there that we adapt to our students' needs. So that's why I said redesign, okay? We take what we like, we remove what we don't, okay? And we just give it a twist. Then I'm going to be talking about scaffolding, assessment, and we said when we gave you the abstract for this webinar that these were going to be the 3 core tenets, so to say. There's going to be a bonus track, so I'm going to be sharing something else with you, okay? And as Eleonora said, last but not least, at the end, we're going to have a little Q&A sharing time, okay? So save anything wonderful you have to do or any questions, comments, please save them for the end so that we can talk about it. So I decided to start with a couple of memes, and you'll be wondering why. Well, I feel that when we think about students with special needs, the first thing we think about is time, okay? And the syllabus, okay? So I really like this one, with Ryan Gosling saying, I like the way you differentiated instruction to meet the needs of learners, all the while, with, also respecting the syllabus, okay? Because that's kind of an issue that we have, especially when we want to implement something new, yes? And then, sorry, I just want to, Mariano, I would like to remove the, the control panel from the bottom because it doesn't allow me to read well. Would you help me with that? Or, sorry, people, to interrupt.
Maybe in options, clicking more.
What's that? In options? Oh, hide video panel, maybe?
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's not it. No, no, it was not the video panel. I'm so sorry. Well, that's fine. It's all right. Don't worry. So, and then the other one is, I like this one because, wait, you mean we actually get a designated timing to differentiate instruction? Like we can allot some time to do this? Because that's another of our fears. And last but not least, I like this one too. Here are teachers. Sometimes we feel like we are drowning, because we have so much on our plate, Oh, we have to deal with social and emotional learning, preparing classes, using, virtual classrooms, especially after the pandemic. We tended to keep all those virtual tools which worked and add them to our face-to-face instruction. And in addition to that, well, work with students with special needs. So that seems like a lot to do for sometimes one teacher. So hopefully my ideas or my experience will help you with all of these. Okay, that's what I thought of when designing this webinar. Now, a couple of thoughts before we kick off, yes? And you may find that the ideas shared throughout this webinar will benefit all your students. And this is connected with this idea of not having time to differentiate instruction or to make, you know, or to have the special conditions for those students who need it, okay? Because that's all we think about, time. When am I gonna do all that, okay? So to be more practical, let's say, you will find that many of these tips are useful for all your students, not just those with special needs. And you'll tell me your opinion at the end. But first of all, I want to tell you my experience. And what do I mean when I say students with special needs? I'm going to talk from my own experience, and that is students with dyslexia, students who are on the spectrum, immigrants, and this has been quite a recent experience of mine, you know, children coming from Russia, okay, students coming from Russia, some of them not handling English very well, some of them not being able to make themselves understood much. So that's pretty interesting for me. And of course, those students we have always had, students who struggle, students who need some help, especially after these two last years, you know. Some general advice first. And I know you might say, oh, when I give you some of it, you might think, oh, come on, this is, you know, common sense. But well, I thought I should mention it. So we might not have gotten enough training in college, you know, about how to teach English to students with dyslexia or students who are on the spectrum or with any other special need. So I know maybe some schools don't count on them, but if you do count on an educational psychologist, do reach out and ask for help, okay? They can give you some really good advice. As a matter of fact, they have helped me a lot throughout the years to learn, and work with these students. There are also webinars, you know, as this one, or there are courses that you can do, but it turns out these people can be really helpful. Establish a bond with students. That's like must. I know what you're thinking, Laura, you should establish a good bond with all students. I know that, but these students need it the most. And sometimes, you know how we say, okay, no Spanish in the classroom, only English. Well, you might need to bend that rule a little bit when it comes to students with special needs, because it is necessary for them to feel relaxed. It is necessary to feel they are in a safe environment. Self-esteem plays a really key role in these students, okay? And once again, I know that you might be thinking, well, it's the same for all students, but these students feel they are not intelligent enough, or feel they cannot learn, or they cannot do things, okay? So it's really important that you try and boost their self-esteem. I like working with the growth mindset. So whenever a student says they can do it, I tell them, okay, just add the word yet at the end. Okay, you can do it yet, but that doesn't mean that you won't be able to do it after, you know, some hard work and practice. Make agreements beforehand. Let parents know, hold meetings, because depending on the case, they might need some special accommodations. So you need to let the parents know first, and students, because you cannot just start, you know, for instance, taking students outside the classroom to work with them on a more one-to-one basis without them knowing first, okay? It's really important that they know. prioritize your students' well-being and check how they feel about those arrangements. Because some students say, I don't want to be different. I don't want to, go outside the classroom and work with you alone. I want to be inside with my classmates. So here you can play a little bit, okay? And yes, sometimes you may work with these students who need some, special attention outside, but you can also take other students who don't need it. That way they won't feel they are the only ones going out with you, or that way they won't feel like, okay, it's because I'm not smart enough. And don't force students to read aloud in front of the whole class, especially these students. I have a student who is, I have two at the moment who, that's in the afternoon, have to be fair, sorry. I work in two schools, okay? So I have experience, or I have students with special needs from grade 1 through 6, okay? So she has trouble reading, of course. So I don't ask her to read unless she offers herself to do so, okay? Because I know how nervous she can get. Sometimes you have to deal with other students' anxiety because they are not fluent enough or they make too many mistakes. So you really have to let them be and let them read when they are ready. I feel you cannot force them to read, as you might, with students who don't struggle, let's say. So let's avoid putting them on the spot unnecessarily. How they say that when you learn a language, you are paying attention to everything, okay? And when you feel confident, when you have when you have had enough input, will you be able to, produce, right? So I feel it's kind of the same with these students, okay? You have to know when the time is right to encourage them and, or let them be. Learners with special needs close to you and the board. Consider giving them instructions printed out instead of making them copy from the board. Sometimes it may take ages for them to copy. It's just the way they are, okay? It depends on the case, but some of them can be really slow when copying. Some of them would omit parts of what you are copying, not to mention if you write in cursive. If you write in cursive on the board, they will find it more difficult, okay, to copy from your handwriting. So this is one option, okay? You can have the instructions printed out and give them, give the instructions to them and, save some time and maybe allot that time for them to solve whatever exercise you need them to solve, because that happens as well. You might need to let them work on whatever you are teaching a little longer. Now, let's talk about the first item on our agenda, and that is material redesign or material design. When it comes to font type and size, it's very important that you use either of these two types, Arial or Times New Roman, 12 or 14, okay? So if you feel, oh, but I'm using more pages, no, I need to cram this a little bit more, this will be really detrimental to those students, okay? Now, for first cycle, I have found out that writing in low-case letters, or, well, not to mention cursive. So low-case letters are hard for them to read. They would confuse, for instance, the D and the P, okay? They would find it hard to read. So use all caps for first cycle. First and second grade, I would say, no italics, okay? Avoid using italics. Once again, as Eleonora said, I'm gonna be sharing with you this presentation at the end. To be fair, Mariano will put the link in the chat box, so don't worry, okay? You will have all this information with you, including the links. Page setup. And when I talk about page setup, I can think about the hard copy or the digital copy. So first of all, you need to have your handout signed in double space or 150, no less than that. Okay, so the font is important, the size is important, and the spacing is important. Okay, if you use paper, I learned this in a course I did a couple of years ago, that the yellow background is helpful for students with dyslexia. It's easier for them to read. Okay, now what happened to me is the following. So I would design the handouts and we would print, I don't know, 2 in yellow and the rest in white. So these students would feel like really different. So then we said, okay, let's not do that. Let's print half and half. So some people will get yellow, some people will get white, but of course, between you and me, these students with special needs will always get the yellow one, okay? Because it's easier for them to read that way, okay? If you do it in a Google Doc, you can also choose to do that, mind you. Yes, you can change in page, exactly in that item, page setup, you can choose whether you want the page horizontal or vertical and the background color. Instructions and illustrations in your handout. Pay attention to wording, okay? Try and make instructions simple. Students with special needs don't need context. If you give them context, you lose them in the middle of your instruction. So try and keep it simple. And of course, the younger they are, the more simple your instructions should be, okay? Like only stick to verbs, you know, cut and read, or I don't know, read and cut, okay? Or read and match. So the younger they are, the fewer words. Do away with frames, okay? And unnecessary images. I know how beautiful they look. They look amazing. And the drawings and all the decorations. But these students get really distracted when you give them a page or a handout with frames or too many images, okay? They lose focus and they don't concentrate on the text. They focus on all the other details, okay? So less is more for them. I'm gonna show you 2 big no-nos, okay? And I hope the creator of these handouts are not here, you know, in the audience. I hope not, but no offense, okay? Because they look wonderful. But if you take a look at the first handout, well, too much information, right? I know it's very useful to have the theory next to the exercise. So useful, very, but not on the same page, okay? So here we have this problem of too much information together, everything cramped in one page, the font, okay? And I'm sure you must have thought this at least once in your life as a student, not having enough space to write. Now, wouldn't that be something all students would benefit from, okay? Having enough space, okay? And then if you take a look at this other one, so colorful, you know, especially now, tomorrow, spring begins. It's beautiful. Yes, you look at it and it's wonderful, but too many distractions, okay? It's confusing. Should they start with 1 and then 3 or 1 and 2, okay? We have to do away with these, let's say, decorations. Okay, what looks pretty, like I said, may be confusing or misleading for students with special needs, okay? Now, let's talk about the second item on our agenda, and that is scaffolding. So you have to read instructions and texts aloud. I have a student who is now very well aware of her needs. So whenever she's completing an exercise and she has trouble going on, she comes to me. Fortunately, she comes to me, you know, and asks for help, because that's why I was saying before that the bonding part is so important, you know. If they don't feel, you know, comfortable enough with us, they might not reach out for help. And then we have another problem there. So this student will come to me and say, Laura, will you read this to me? So that she finds an answer to a question, okay? Or so that she understands what she's reading. So I like this meme as well, because it says, when the teacher walks up to you during an exam and looks at your paper, then shouts out, guys, please make sure you read the questions carefully. You know, so actually, when you read for those students with special needs, you might be helping other people, because let's face it, another problem we're dealing with right now is that students do not read the instructions, okay? So understanding the instructions is, well, basically key to completing the exercise correctly. Okay, when it comes to digital handout, before I talked about the background and the font and the space, okay, there is something very interesting, and it is connected to what I have just said about reading out loud. During the pandemic, because I wasn't there with my students when they completed the handouts, I started hyperlinking the instructions with myself reading them out loud. Okay, so one of the tools I used is Vocaroo. Okay, it's free, it's really user-friendly. Okay, so I would record myself reading the instruction or reading a text for students. Okay, and the options. For instance, if I designed a multiple choice exercise, I would read the text and the options, okay? So that these students, while they were reading, would listen to me too, doing so. So that's really helpful. Another tool that you might know is Mote, spelled M-O-T-E. This, let's say, integrates with Google Classroom, okay? So you might as well use it in Google Classroom as well, not just in digital handouts, okay? To read, to leave an audio feedback, which is really helpful. And last but not least, here I am mentioning one of the many screencast tools that we have out there. As I said before, well, in the case of Mote and Screencastify, they integrate with all the G Suite package, okay? So not only can you record your voice, but you can record your video, okay? Explaining something to students. And like I said, students with special needs really benefit from having you there, explaining things to them. Give them one exercise at a time. Whether you are working with just a regular activity any day of the year or during tests, okay? So if you have everything in one page, what you can do is cut it out, okay? And give them one exercise at a time, okay? Going back to giving them a heads up, okay? Let them know what you will do, okay? So that they don't feel it's a surprise for them, okay? And be ready, because sometimes they may be a little bit reluctant to receiving special accommodations, okay? So try and talk them into this. Explain why it's important for them to have this special help at first. Then when they are ready, you know, they can just do the exercises the way their classmates do, okay? So you negotiate in a way with them. Provide a word bank, okay? If you're doing an exercise and you didn't provide one for the rest of the class, it might be a good idea to do this for these students. If you're teaching them to write something, okay, well, it will be hard for them to know or remember vocabulary, even how to write that vocabulary. So providing a word bank is really useful. And depending on the case, you might allow them to have a chart, either with the rules, the grammar rules, or the verb conjugations. I have a student who does that. So she has the first, the second, and the third column. Okay, that's the special arrangement with her. You will find that not all students with special needs, some people talk about learning disabilities. It is up to you the term you want to give it. I prefer to say special needs or with different abilities, right? So not all students are the same. There might be some similarities between one case and the other, but you really need to see what works for each special learner. Highlight key information. So this happened to me not long ago. I realized that if I highlighted the word, that would make them focus on it, and thus would make it easier for them to solve the exercise. So that's another tip I can give you. And you can do that, with a highlighter. Anticipate texts. And you can do this in email or by email, or you can give them in paper. Like I would send the text before we read them in class, so that these students are already familiar with what we're going to work with. Okay, depending on the case, you may do this for just regular classes and or tests. Okay, if you are giving them a reading comprehension exercise, give them the text. Of course, don't give them the exercise, but if you give them the text, they will be more prepared. And as I mentioned before, allow these kids some extra time to finish activities, always keeping them on track, of course, because I have one of them, and he sits near me and everything, but I really have to keep an eye, a close eye or close tabs on him, because he gets easily distracted. Okay, that's the way he is. It's not that he's lazy. It's not that he's not intelligent. He gets distracted. It's his let's say profile. Okay, learner profile. And provide them with audiobooks. So I'm a literature teacher too, and we read 2 novels throughout the year. And what I did was to upload to Google Classroom the PDF format and the audiobook. Okay, so and they have the paperback as well, but this is really helpful. Now, talking about assessment, I have already said a couple of things, but once again, and I cannot stress this enough, read instructions aloud. And as I pointed out at the beginning of this webinar, all students can benefit from this, okay? And when it comes to timing, you're doing the same with all students, but you know who will benefit more, right, from you reading the instructions out loud. So this is very, very important. Now, students who have trouble expressing themselves in written form can benefit from oral exams and orally checking answers with them. Okay, especially if you think of subjects such as social science or natural science or history, where you have so much content. Okay, so you may find that when they write, they don't make sense, but if they tell you the answer, they will. Okay, so do start thinking of doing this in written exams. Add this oral part. Now, I have some anecdotes to share, apart from the ones that I've told you so far, yes? And one of them is about a test I gave my students. It was a present simple versus present continuous test. So I really like to give my students the same types of exercise or different types of exercises, but the same the same format I'm gonna use for testing them so that I don't betray them, you know? So then I had the practice, the test, and the makeup test in the same format. So here's what the educational psychologist thought it was better for one of my students. They what they did was to provide a broken down text, so no longer a whole text, but they broke it down in paragraphs, and then they provided a multiple choice of present tenses, you know? And my students had not practiced with that format for the makeup. So then what I did was, okay, she didn't pass the makeup. Actually, she did better in the first test. So I gave her just an exercise as practice with the same format, and she passed it, okay? So I'm sharing this with you so that you see that it's trial and error as well. You know, you have to see what works for them. For this kid, that didn't work because it wasn't the format that I had her get used to, okay? So as I said, her performance declined in that makeup exam. And when we give them makeup exams, we want to help them, not, you know, sink them. So some years ago, I had this student with test anxiety. So he would get really, really nervous, you know. And this is kind of connected to my next webinar on Friday, you know, doing some breathing and stretching before a test, okay? So I started doing this, you know, before each test. And by the end of the year, his performance improved because he felt more relaxed, you know, during tests, okay? So breathing and stretching before a test can be really helpful for these students. And this is a more recent anecdote that I have. One of my students, you know, he was doing the conditional type 3 test. And in one of the exercises, like I said, the same format we had been practicing before the exam, I asked them to come up with one sentence of their own. They had to invent a conditional type 3 sentence, which can be really challenging, yes, but he had studied, I could see that, he had studied a lot, he had practiced, but then when he, you know, he came up to me for help, and I looked at the sentence, I said, okay, so let's just look at this. What is it that you wanted to write? You know, depending on the case, they have trouble expressing their ideas in an orderly way. And this was no exception. So what I did was, okay, say it. What is it that you want to write? And what I did, I wrote it in pencil for him. And then he copied the sentence in ink. Now, it's not that I did it for him because he actually solved it, but orally. He just needed some scaffolding, you know, when writing his ideas. And here's the bonus track I want to share with you. You might be wondering, okay, how about error correction and grading? Because one of the things I mentioned at the beginning is that self-esteem is really important, especially in these cases, okay? And we don't want them to feel frustrated because everything, you know, is corrected. So, well, choose your battles, okay? Choose what to correct. when it comes to students with dyslexia, you have to correct the spelling, right? But don't penalize them. That is, if you're testing them in the present simple, don't lower their grades because they made a lot of spelling mistakes, okay? Because it's something that came with them, okay? It's not lack of studying, okay? It's not being lazy, okay? It's part of who they are. And reading aloud with first and second graders, you know, can be challenging, okay? Especially because they tend to look at you when you read and not the text. And you know what I do, I work with smaller groups to read a book. You know, actually the book is in their tablets. So I need them to focus on the text and the pronunciation, because they tend to focus on just saying things, okay? And it's really good for them to make the connection between words or phoneme and grapheme, okay? And that is achieved by looking at the text and listening at the same time, okay? And let's face it, that's one of the problems these students face, okay? They cannot make the connection between phoneme and grapheme, okay? So do make them look at the text as well. And there are some more resources I want to share with you. Natural Reader is a text-to-speech tool. Actually, you know, one of my students, he's at university, and I shared with him this tool, and he found it really useful because, you know, for instance, in the case of dyslexia, this is something that accompanies a person for their whole lives, okay? So they find it useful no matter the age, this text-to-speech reader, yes? Even for you, if you're writing a paper or something and you want to copy and paste whatever you have written, and you know how sometimes when you listen to something, you realize about a mistake or an idea that you would like to change? Well, it's the same for them. So Natural Reader is a great resource. And here you will see the YouTube logo. There is a video, it's in Spanish, okay, but I thought that the resources they shared were really interesting. And they also provide some workshops, you know, to work with children with special needs. So I said, oh, this is something interesting to share. And then I don't know if you've ever worked with this website. It's called ReadWorks, okay? It's a wonderful tool to differentiate reading instruction, okay, with different texts and activities based on these texts. Why is it great? Because you can customize it according to your students' needs, okay, or levels. There is an audio version, so you can, or students, you know, can choose to read a text and have them listen, you know, to the audio as well. So go ahead and give it a try. Yes, this is a great tool. And then I wanted to mention, maybe you know this platform as well. It's called Future Learn. This is where I did my teaching English to students with dyslexia a couple of years ago, and it was useful as well. So I wanted to share these extra resources with you, you know. And I wanted to tell you this to wrap up. This has been my experience so far, okay? And hopefully you have found it useful. I tried to share all the practical things, or all the day-to-day things that I thought you could need, okay? And remember this, every student is unique, okay? And there might be some similarities. You might find that, oh yes, they have problem reading aloud, but maybe one student is very organized with their binder, and the other one cannot keep things organized around themselves, you know, the binder, the desk, because everything is kind of disorganized in their lives, okay? And they will each need something different, okay? What works with some learners, you will find that might not work with others, okay? So thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for being there. Are there any questions that you would like to ask me? Or now it's the time to share as well. Yes, as I share here some credits and you know, where I took my resources from. I'm gonna look at the chats. Yes.
Thank you so much, Laura. There is a question. How about teaching grammar? How to teach it inductively to younger learners? What's the best way?
That's a great question. So, well, first of all, you know that exposure is really, really important for these students. And I would definitely rely on having a piece of paper or a chart with the rules. Always have the rules at hand, because they will not, you know, remember them. So you might ask them questions, you might make them do connections, okay? You can do that as well, depending on the age, right? Because you're talking about younger learners, okay? So it depends on how young they are, because you know their abstract thinking is not totally developed, especially at a certain age. Yes, like if you ask me 6th grade, well, yes, no problem, right? But 2nd grade, 1st grade, they can do it. They can do it, but depending on what you're teaching them, you know, but they can make connections, absolutely.
Yes, and if you can see, there is a comment from Patricia saying, you know, that all your tips are really useful, and she agrees with all of them. And that those
Great.
tips will make our teaching better to all students. Okay, so
I mean, to be honest, this is what we do, because we lack the time, you know, to just do certain handouts with, you know, prepare certain handouts with for these students, and regular ones for the rest. It's really difficult because we lack the time. I mean, we have all the love for our profession and everything, but the time. So I have found it practical to, you know, do it for everyone. Yes.
yes,
and also they don't feel, sorry.
Yes, no, that in fact, you know, this is what universal design for learning dictates now. Okay, so because in that way we will, you know, cater to all styles and needs. In fact, yes, I was wondering, how do you deal with students who, you know, make a comment about others getting a different handout or having a special accommodation? You know, there's always a kid that says, oh, why does he or she get this and I don't, or why does she have more time? I don't know if this has happened to you.
It's a really good question. Fortunately, it hasn't, because they I don't know, I'm just lucky, and they are really they know what their classmates need. But you know, what I do mention quite often is that everybody has their own pace when it comes to learning, pace and needs. So I would just mention something like that to them. I would just say, well, you know, maybe what works for you doesn't work for him. So we try and keep this this class as diverse as possible, you know, and respect each other's differences, you know, and similarities too. So maybe I would say something like that.
Yes, and here Juan Emilio says it's a matter of trial and error, and in fact, it is. Yes,
it is. It definitely is. Like I said, with those, when I first learned about the yellow pages, and I was all excited about the yellow pages, and then they would feel frustrated, and then I would get that question: why does he get the yellow pages and not me? So then that's when I started, asking for half and half. So then everybody's happy. So yeah. And plus they don't feel, on the spot. For me, it's so important that they don't feel on the spot,
Yes, because that's what really, builds their self-confidence.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
And
for these
yes, you mentioned the growth mindset, and so this is something that we really have to help build. Thank you, Laura, because these are very practical tips.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. That was my, my idea when preparing this webinar. I'm going to share, of course, like I said, I learned a lot from educational psychologists throughout the years. And honestly, I have worked at a school in which their educational psychologist department was really helpful, really supportive. But sometimes we, not all of us have that, and maybe at teacher training college, we get an idea, but what you learn from experience, I think, is the best, the best way to learn.
That's it. Yes, you pick them up from working with your students and trying to help them. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Everyone is saying that this was a very interesting webinar, and I had one more question about this tool you mentioned, Natural Reader, the text-to-speech tool. Is that, I would say that would be very useful for students that have visual impairments.
Oh, definitely.
Not just dyslexia, but have you worked with somebody who cannot see?
Only in college. When I was in the US, I had this student who couldn't see she was partially, I would say, or totally blind from one eye, just one eye. But I didn't have the chance to use any of these tools with her. But no, not with, not here, not in Argentina, no. But yes, definitely the text-to-speech tool is great for all learners, yes.
And I see that Patricia is sharing a link to a book to help kids see their classmates with a disability in a different light. So thank you, Patricia, for sharing this link. Yes, and
I will check it out later. Thank you.
Please. Yes, it's good to have you participating, Patricia. She is a very experienced teacher here in Córdoba, Argentina. Thank you for joining us today. Yes.
And I can see Agustina has a question. Agustina Villafañez, she says, can you give an example of how to help students with special needs STEAM? What did you mean exactly? Like with their self-esteem? Agustina, I don't know if you would like to open your mic.
We do not, since this is a webinar, people can only ask questions in the chat or the question and answer.
Yes.
But she means the self-esteem.
Self-esteem.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Definitely. Well, I mean, you have to talk to them, I feel, and you really need to devote time to talking to students. You know how every day we might need to deal with different or with conflict resolution, okay? And first, I mean, talk to them privately, okay? It depends on what issue they are going through, but I think you have to make it clear to them that it's not that they are not intelligent, that it's not that they cannot do it, okay? And that that they have made an effort and studied hard. You have to encourage them to keep doing that, because they will tend to feel frustrated if they studied very hard for a test. I'm talking about a test, for instance, and then they failed. They will feel like crushed. So I think it's very important that you keep them motivated, praise them a lot. You know, I would praise them whenever they do something well, say that's great, or look at your progress, okay? Showing them how they have improved, I think is really important too. And this is what I did with a student of mine. So the first test, she got a 6, and the passing mark is a 7. And she was, you know, on the verge of tears. So I said, listen, to me, this, no, sorry. She got a 7. Sorry, she got a 7. And I said, this 7 for me is like a 10. I said, this 7 is a solid 7. This 7, I know how much effort you put into this and how much you studied. This is a 10. And she left with a smile. So, yeah, I think it all depends on what happened to this person, but I would encourage them a lot. Of course, I know that we have different students and those who maybe don't like to study, but well, you know, with these students, you have to be, you know, really, how can I say, nurturing, you know, and really patient. And well, it's not that you can do it, or it's not personal, because some may take it as personal. So I hope I have answered your question, Agustina.
I think so, and I guess you have also answered. Sajad asked how to keep students highly motivated.
Well, it's a broad question as regards what do you mean? Because in general, to keep my students motivated in general, I like to use different techniques, and I try to innovate in my class. When it comes to these students with special needs, I would try and give them, like, I would challenge them, but sometimes I would give them something that they can do really well, so that they can feel, you know, oh, I can do this, I want to do more, so that they can feel motivated, okay? So that they don't feel it's torture, okay? So I think varying the things you do in class will keep them motivated, and maybe giving them something they can do and they feel proud, and, you know, because if they feel frustrated, they demotivate, they just feel demotivated, right?
Yes, that's, you know, our challenge, you know, finding the balance between challenge and pushing them or stretching our students.
Right, the right degree of challenge, right? The right degree. That's yes.
How much do you nudge them, you know, to move forward?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Laura.
My pleasure.
Really, yes, everyone is making comments about all your tips, and they are all grateful, because you know, they come from experience and from what you have actually, you know, practiced in your classes. And I want to invite everyone to join us this Friday, because Laura has kindly agreed to present this Friday. You can see on the screen, Brain Breaks, Increasing Students' Productivity, Energy, and Motivation. So talking about motivation and keeping our students engaged.
Yes.
This will be an excellent opportunity to learn about more tips from somebody who has tried them in her classes. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And remember, join us this Friday at 2:30. You know that we usually meet once a week on Tuesdays at 2:30. But this Friday, we will also have a webinar by Laura. And we are also reaching the end of the Teaching Capacity Building program. Our last webinar will be next Tuesday, September 27, with Romina Maracita. So I want to thank all the people who have been joining us since we started in May. I'm sure you have lots of takeaways, and you're already reflecting on or putting into practice some of the ideas that all these alumni speakers have been sharing with us. Thank you again, all the people who joined us today. Thank you, Noris, for your constant support. And well, I'll see you, Laura, next Friday. I mean, this Friday. We are all excited about your tips this Friday. Thank you again. I hope all of you could download the certificate of attendance and Laura's presentation. See you soon then. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you. Thank you, everyone.